Darkblade Assassin by Andy Peloquin is the first in a planned 10-book dark fantasy series. This is a book that was sent to me for review, and I gave it my best shot. I don't normally read the dark fantasy genre, and this one ended up not being for me, and full transparency, I stopped reading after 200 pages. But I'm going to try to give what I did read a very fair review, because even though it didn't end up being for me, I did think it was well done, and fans of dark fantasy might like it. Also, the cover is very cool. I love the colors and the style. This cover art is done by Luciano. I'll definitely link his art page in the description. The main character of the story is the Hunter of Voramus. He is an assassin, and he decides what contracts to take. He has his own set of morals, and he's usually pretty happy to take contracts against the corrupt and the rich and the upper class people that tend to suppress the lower class in the city. He does not generally go after anyone in the Bloody Hand, the local crime syndicate. They are a little too powerful for him, not a group he wants to start a war with. The Bloody Hand has so much control over the city that they basically rule the city more than the actual ruling class does. And the premise of this story has to do with that tension between the ruling class, the Bloody Hand, and the Hunter. And while before the Bloody Hand and the Hunter have been okay with kind of leaving each other alone, things happen, decisions are made, and now they are not content to ignore each other anymore. And so a little bit of a war starts. I say a little bit of a war because the Hunter is just one man, but this one man is not nothing. I thought the first chapter was very strong. It is setting the stage, it's setting the tone, it's letting you know what kind of book you are getting yourself into. And it sets the expectations for the type of content you can expect for the rest of the book. But really what I thought the first chapter did really well was setting up the character of the Hunter, letting us know what kind of character he is, how strong and competent he is, how cool he is, how feared, the type of magic that he has and can call upon, as well as showing us what the Hunter hates and why he might choose to take certain assassination contracts over others. And then after that first chapter of here's what you are getting, here's how cool this book and this character are going to be, it slows way down. In those first 200 pages that I read, there was not a ton of plot happening, but there was a lot of setup. It really is taking its time to get you introduced to the world, the characters, giving you time to get to know the main character outside of when he's just fulfilling contracts, letting you get to know the city of Voramus and how things work here. And I was fine with that. I was fine with it taking its time. This is a 600-page fantasy novel. When you pick up a book that's this big, there's certain expectations when you go in, and one of those is getting to know the world that you're being introduced to. In a new story with new characters, there's stuff to know about the place. And so slowing the pace down I thought was totally fine and normal, and in taking that time to set the stage, you're getting very well introduced to this dark and gritty place that the story takes place in. And speaking of setting the stage and introducing you to the world, the descriptions were very smell and sound oriented, which was very atmospheric, and I really got a sense of how dark and dirty and kind of gross this city is, which I think is part of the point. This is the world that the Hunter lives in. It's the world that he cares about some parts, hates other parts, and he's going to decide how he takes care of those. One of the weird things, and it could be also considered one of the cool things maybe, I felt like it was a little weird. The Hunter usually goes out in disguise. He doesn't want anyone to know what he actually looks like, sounds like, so he's gotten very good at disguising himself. And because he disguises himself so completely, not just in his appearance, but in how he behaves, how he speaks, it almost felt like reading about multiple different characters. I felt like that added a little bit of disjointedness because he would dress up in this disguise, go out and do a job, and then go into another disguise and go do another job. And through that, he's becoming different people, different characters. So that already made it feel like separate characters, but also going to do these different jobs felt like different scenes that weren't necessarily connected, and I found myself wondering how the plot was supposed to be connected through these. And it did feel like it took a little while for the plot to start to develop, and by the time it felt like the plot was really starting to develop at almost 200 pages in, again, probably fine, because that was only a third of the book. There's still 2/3 to go, still plenty of time for plot development, action, whatever. But around that point, I decided that I had had enough, and I didn't need to know how it ended. I didn't need to stay in that world to see the end. I just skipped ahead and read part of the end, which it does seem like it has a satisfactory wrap-up, while also leading you into the next book, getting you to want to see what happens next. Where does the story take this character? Because there are, well, right now 8, but there will be 10. I felt like the book had a lot of depth. It was very immersive. There was lots of violence, a lot of death, and it wasn't just violence and death. The way it was all described was very dark and gritty and sometimes gross. Lots of just general dark stuff. It is a dark fantasy. And if those 200 pages that I had read had been one book, like a little 200-page dark fantasy book, I would have been fine. But there were 400 more pages, and I was kind of done with that type of content. It was enough for me. So while I say that this book did not end up being for me and I DNF'd after 200 pages, I am not saying that it's a bad book or not well done. And I do think that fans of dark fantasy should check it out, give it a try. And if you like it, there are plenty more of them. So in the description, I will link the author, the cover artist. I'll also link my Patreon and Instagram. Thank you, as always, to my patrons for your support. I appreciate you guys. And whatever you're reading right now, happy reading. Bye.